who is the CEO of the California Emerging Technologies Fund, a fund that's specifically trying to address this very issue. So as some of you I'm sure know, Sunny, she is a Valley girl, and I say that in a very positive way, and has been involved in trying to make the Valley a better place for many, many years. Was a key member of the Schwarzenegger administration, was key in developing the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley. I've known Sunny for a long time, I'll just say that, and delighted to have known her this long. And we're delighted to have her today. So without me talking any further, I want to pass it over to Sunne McPeak, our guest today.
Thank you, Mark. And what a pleasure and honor to be here with this Maddy series and to see so many friends and allies who have continued to be the leaders on the ground in the trenches to continue the quest for prosperity in the San Joaquin Valley. Mark really identified me up front as what is the most important characteristic, and it is that I'm from the San Joaquin Valley. So being an old family and farm girl from the San Joaquin Valley, rural Merced, 6 miles out of Livingston. Now that's a rural experience growing up. And you have a different understanding and perspective on the world if what you have to do is make your living actual farming on the ground. You also have an appreciation for what the San Joaquin Valley has as its values, as its literally basic roots. And as Mark said, I just want to acknowledge it's terrific to have those of you who instructed me and got the Schwarzenegger administration to recognize the San Joaquin Valley as the promise for California's future. And I literally, saying to Paul Boyer, have the book we wrote. Seeing Mayor-elect Jerry Dyer here. Jerry, thank you. And you were police chief at the time that we were dealing with the San Joaquin Valley partnership being established. Larry Salinas helped organize a lot of the meetings then at UC Merced. Luisa Medina got the responsibility to help carry through with Paul. It was just this huge effort that was an amazing idea that came from the San Joaquin Valley. It was the leaders from Fresno and the San Joaquin Valley who came to me when I was first working for the state as Secretary of Business, Transportation, and Housing, and said, you know, the federal government, and it was actually President Bush, had an executive order as a partnership with the San Joaquin Valley. We would like to do the same thing at the state level. I immediately said in that meeting that involved Ashley Swearingen, Deb McNeville, Rick Lehman, Pete Weber, I love that idea, but that decision is above my pay grade. This actually has to be taken to the governor, and it took us 18 months to actually get that decision made. I can remember the conversation that probably convinced Arnold Schwarzenegger more than anything else, and it was with Mayor Alan Autry and me in the room with the governor alone, explaining what Highway 99 was, that it was indeed a highway, not a freeway, and that if you were going to, for example, in the Livingston area, actually try to, if you're northbound on Highway 99, get off on Peach Avenue, you would literally pull to the left, and in the middle of the fog, the Tule fog of the San Joaquin Valley, take your chances of crossing over on the oncoming traffic. So I remember Arnold listening to Alan and saying, really? And almost that was the thing that said, we've got to change the situation. We're going to have a special relationship between the state and the San Joaquin Valley, all 8 counties, all of the cities, and then we went about trying to put together a governance structure for this partnership. I'm telling you the story because I want everybody on this conversation to appreciate the difference that leadership from the San Joaquin Valley makes in state policy. That we then in 2004, 5, 6, with the delegation from the San Joaquin Valley leading the charge, Juana Rambula in the forefront, that we've got to have a different way of governing ourselves. And I think that's exactly what I always understood, Mark, from Ken Maddy. So to just honor the founder or the person whose spirit we embrace with the Maddy Institute, Ken was of a different party than I am. That actually hardly holds in the San Joaquin Valley because we go back to our roots of what does it mean to make a difference and how do we all work together? And that's always been a hallmark out of the San Joaquin Valley. And so today, in talking about the digital divide, I just want to acknowledge also going back to those debates in 2005 and 6 when we were putting together the proposal, and Paul might remember this. I actually didn't even want to deal with technology. I thought we already had too much on our plate. I mean, I always thought it was important. Before I'd gone to work for the state, I had been at the Bay Area Council, an employer-based civic leadership organization. We had advanced the notion of broadband as part of a mobility network. It was to help us with transportation mobility, as a matter of fact. And I had actually advanced it as Secretary of Business, Transportation, and Housing, but I thought, okay, we had enough on our plate. It was Carol Whiteside, just to honor a founding director of the California Emerging Technology Fund, who tried to convince me, and did so successfully, that indeed we had to put into our plan for the future of the San Joaquin Valley technology, high-speed internet, infrastructure, and the use of it. And so while I wasn't paying attention, the California Public Utilities Commission approved mergers in 2005. In that year, SBC was buying AT&T. They kept the name AT&T. And Verizon was buying MCI. The California Public Utilities Commission, led by Susan Kennedy and Michael Peavy, decided that it was time that California have a not-for-profit statewide organization to close the digital divide in California. And they negotiated with those two successor companies the seed capital for the California Emerging Technology Fund, which was $60 million. And I've long said to this farm girl, $60 million is a hell of a lot of money. But California is a big damn state. And so from the very beginning, we knew we had to work with existing leadership organizations throughout California to form essentially regional consortia, and the San Joaquin Valley partnership was ready-made to be that kind of regional partner. So it was very easy for me just to turn around and to say to all of you who were my allies, my mentors, my teachers, my partners, as I worked for the state, we're just going to now start working together on broadband. And I use broadband, I should really underscore, as a generic term for high-speed internet infrastructure, wireline and wireless. We need a combination of technologies to reach all communities, to best complement all uses. And so we're about the experience of the customer, all customers that are at the residential, sometimes called last mile. Cynic likes to call it first mile, but what we experience at home, up to what is experienced at CSU Fresno for research and collaboration with other institutions that require lots and lots of bandwidth. Seeing Kurt Madden here, who has been a pioneer in education, trying to get all the schools, Fresno Unified, connected. Kurt, you know that experience, trying to ensure now in this era of distance learning, which is a whole different context than we ever experienced, what it means so that all of our students can stay online. That's very critical. But having the opportunity to immediately, when the California Emerging Technology Fund was stood up by the PUC, and I was hired by the board to come be the founding CEO, we turned to the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley, and we actually started working on telehealth. One of the first grants was to UC Merced. And part of what was so persuasive about telehealth and working with UC Merced was what we had heard listening during the formation of this proposal that we submitted to the state from the Hospital Association, from the health plans. Kaiser was very involved. We had, with Corin Hopper, we had the Children's Hospital in Madera had provided amazing input, and UC Merced had done an analysis that said, if we had telehealth, i.e. enabled by high-speed internet infrastructure throughout the San Joaquin Valley, we could keep over $800 million annually in the San Joaquin Valley economy. That we wouldn't be exporting it to UC San Francisco or Stanford or other hospitals and facilities external to the valley. That was an amazing insight that underscored how high-speed internet infrastructure can support all facets of our economy, can be the essential infrastructure, just as roads and electricity and water, I say also housing, workforce that is trained, that we need to be prosperous economically. I have said I'm an old family farm girl from the San Joaquin Valley, and what you learn growing up on a farm is that if it breaks and you don't fix it, you don't eat. It's a pretty short, compelling equation, right? So it's always how do we get something done with a sense of urgency, because we always have to work in that mode. And ag is still a bedrock of economic activity for the entire state. I think I saw Glenda Humiston, who of course is representing the entire University of California Ag and Natural Resources Division here. I saw Bob Gore, who has the Ag Tech Roundtable, join. I can't see all of the participants right now. I'm sure there are a lot more I should be calling out, but I want to say they have been part of instructing CETF as to why we need technology for agriculture. It's even back to one of our most basic and first pillars of industry in California. We now need this convergence of technology and ag in order to continue to be the best ag state in the nation, the center of food production for the world. Fresno County is the most productive agricultural county in the entire country. So the CSU Fresno sort of center that has been the foundation of the Maddy Institute, Mark, the Water Institute at CSU Fresno, the work that Eduardo Gonzalez has done, Ish before him, and the Office of Community and Economic Development. We have worked with Eduardo and also, I would say, Valley Vision to have CSU Fresno and UC Davis help us with looking at the benefits of technology to agriculture. If we're able to get a signal into fields, we know we can increase productivity, decrease the use of natural resources, and have access to external markets. And so there's another example of how could high-speed internet infrastructure help in the San Joaquin Valley be an augmentation to our already amazing agricultural production. And then we have a tremendous asset, obviously, in our people. We know we've got amazing natural talent who don't always get the benefit of being able to go to college. I mean, I was the first to get to go to college and to graduate in my family, courtesy of scholarships. We need to be able to ensure that there is full access to all of our community colleges in the San Joaquin Valley, to the 3 California State Universities, UC, Merced, University of the Pacific. We've got great educational facilities. We need to be able to provide access to our students. The benefit of technology is, in fact, we all could be able to continue to learn if we just had adequate infrastructure throughout the San Joaquin Valley. So before we take questions, I want to tell you what we have been doing, and that is working with partners in the San Joaquin Valley. First and foremost, with Eduardo Gonzalez and the partnership for California and the San Joaquin Valley Broadband Consortium out of CSU Fresno, to promote adoption, to help people learn about affordable broadband, affordable offers, get them online, but also most recently to analyze what will it take as an investment in the San Joaquin Valley to get high-speed internet broadband to every resident and every customer. And a very good analysis was done by CSU Fresno that identified 47,000 unserved households, and we need to invest at least at this point, $43 million. There are some very interesting partnerships that can be forged. If a city has conduit with their water system, Mayor Dyer, there is an opportunity to joint venture if the school districts in the San Joaquin Valley can also step forward, be collaborative. Mark, you and I have talked about bringing together all of the institutions of higher education to ask the question, what else can we do together? We at the California Emerging Technology Fund are not going to be happy until we have the entire San Joaquin Valley connected and all the residents able to use that technology. That is our assignment from the California Public Utilities Commission. It is also our passion, and it is so exciting and energizing to be able to work with the leaders of the San Joaquin Valley that, of course, I'm always wanting to come back to my roots and get inspired all over again. So let me stop and let's start answering people's questions.
Well, we're waiting for some questions to come in. Before they do, though, I want to ask you, Sunny, you were beginning to talk about some of the things that local jurisdictions can do to help close the digital divide. I'm wondering if you want to comment at all about what the federal government or state government might be doing, or maybe what we can help promote, advocate for to close the digital divide here in the Valley.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, that is important because it requires sort of, as we know, efforts at all levels of government, coupled with civic leadership from the private sector. That's the, if you will, the magic sauce. In the San Joaquin Valley, it would be important for all of the jurisdictions to look at how to have at least shared information, and I hope common policies around what we would call being a smart city or a smart county, of facilitating the deployment of high-speed internet infrastructure that reduces the time for approval and permitting. So that's a task I'm going to assign to the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley, Eduardo, Luisa, et cetera, to actually bring all the jurisdictions together. Fortunately, we have an updated guidebook that is about to be released this week that we have worked with the other regional consortia and Valley Vision to make available. That's an important, if you will, sort of foundation for the state to authorize more funding. The California Emerging Technology Fund has been a sponsor of most of the legislation that has authorized collections into a fund administered by the California Public Utilities Commission called the California Advanced Services Fund. We all have had fees collected on our phone bills, and going back to 2007, if you look on your phone bill, you'll see something called High Cost B Fund. Collectively, all of us phone customers, landline and mobile, did pay into that fund at the tune of collectively $300 million a year. That's been reformed, and today the CASF collects $66 million a year, a real benefit in terms of reduced impact on consumers, but still a resource for the PUC to provide subsidies to companies to deploy in rural unserved areas. And we at CTF are did sponsor in the last session. They ran out of time. We couldn't quite get to an agreement, but we will this time around be able to authorize additional collections into the California Advanced Services Fund, because that's where I'm going to go for the $43 million plus that we need to invest in the San Joaquin Valley. We need policy and some other things at the state level, but that's essential. I also will tell you we were ready to sponsor, but we're supporting a general obligation bond that will help invest also side by side with school districts and cities, counties, local jurisdictions who also can put up some funds in order to get adequate speeds to support distance learning and telehealth. And then at the federal level, Mark, the Federal Communications Commission has been managing the Universal Services Fund that provides subsidies to schools and libraries called E-rate, but not managing it in any way that most of us can even understand. There's no transparency with E-rate. I can see Kurt is agreeing with that. That's $4 billion a year that actually needs to be totally reformed, the Universal Services Fund, to better use those dollars. And then we hope that that Congress, through the HEROES Act, will allocate more dollars for infrastructure, for broadband infrastructure, and we'll go after California's fair share. That's the funding. We will want everybody to join us. And actually, the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley, CSU, Fresno, and the San Joaquin Valley Consortium have joined with CETF and Valley Vision on a position paper that we'll make available to you that you can distribute. We want everyone to support, really step up, because we don't want to give the legislature or the administration, the governor's administration, any time to stall more or to not work out agreements at the very beginning of this next session.
Let me ask a question, Sunny. What about if folks want to apply for these funds? Would they go to your website? Is there a clearinghouse where they could find, grants to apply for? Particularly some of the rural communities. We've got some questions about rural communities and school districts.
Yes, you can always go to our website for grants on adoption. So we use these terms in broadband: deployment and adoption. It's supply and demand. Deployment being the building of infrastructure. That's a lot more money than we have. That's why we'll help you with the California Advanced Services Fund. On the side of adoption, that is helping people actually sign up, we have grants from a couple of sources that CSU Fresno already has, but we'll also work with any other interested party. McFarland School District, as an example, has a grant from us that is being paid for by Frontier dollars. We manage Frontier dollars for the purpose of getting folks online. We have a settlement with T-Mobile, and we'll have money for adoption and digital literacy training through T-Mobile. We have a question that I'll answer at this point that Larry Salinas posed, which is there was another bill, SB 1130, that Senator Elena Gonzalez, who had been on the Long Beach City Council before going to the Senate, had. And that bill, which had some reforms for CASF, had no money in it. And that is why we mobilized and got legislation introduced by Cecilia Aguirre Curry the last week of June in order to put on the table. We must have money, because if you do a bill that only diverts money away from rural California, which is what that would have done in effect. I don't think that's what the author intended, perhaps not even the sponsor intended, but there's got to be money on the table. And I will say that the return on investment for infrastructure for high-speed internet service is so high. It is the best ROI that the state today can get on any infrastructure investment. And you know, I'm an advocate for water investment too.
So I want to ask you two questions. One is on the general obligation bond that you're going for, how much are we talking? I know it's early in the process, but how much are you asking for in that general obligation bond?
We were asked by Assemblymember Mert Suchi in May, working with the California School Boards Association, to tell him, because he had the idea that he was going to do a bond measure, so did CSBA. We were asked to do an analysis of the need. I work closely with CENIC, which everybody here knows, the Corporation for Education Networks in California. CENIC is our not-for-profit. We work also closely with Crown Castle, who does a lot of the design work for the internet service providers. And net out of that, I gave them back figures that support 6.25 billion at least. So, and that also, Mark, was for both rural unserved at speeds that are high enough at the end user to support distance learning and telehealth, all fiber middle mile. We must get to a fiber middle mile, all wireline communications ultimately become wireline, wireless, all wireless communications always become wireline. And the fiber middle mile is essential to feed into fiber backbone. And then we also must upgrade low income urban communities. There are census tracts in virtually every city in the San Joaquin Valley, South Fresno, you know very well, that are low income, and that infrastructure is not going to be improved by the marketplace anytime soon. We want the internet service providers to make a profit. That's, if we don't have prosperity, people can't actually put money back into the economy. But we also want everybody to be a part of a solution, all of the ISPs, and we've got to have the dollars for unserved rural and very urban poor. And so 6.25 billion is not an underestimate of what it would take to put monies into back into the economy with a high-speed internet network throughout the state.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions I'm trying to follow here, but some of them have to do with education, and they're asking about, how much are school superintendents involved are they involved in the consortium at all? What about rural school districts? Are you specifically focusing on them as well?
Absolutely, and here's what I'm going to say. Everybody's involved, and you need to be involved more. So there's just, nobody gets a pass. And I'll honor all the leadership. The county office of education, the county superintendents actually have more responsibility these days by statute to work with all of the districts. And that is a really appropriate conduit, to use a technology term, if you will, for all of the districts to come together county by county. And we have a lot of school districts and a lot of smaller school districts that are rural that need to be a part of the conversation. I've been working with Jose Ramirez in Livingston, where I went to school, right? So I went to Livingston Elementary and then Livingston Union High School. Got a great education. I got a great public education in the San Joaquin Valley. But the consortium, and I'm going to go back to, somebody should tell me if Eduardo Gonzalez is on this call, because I'm certainly tagging him with a lot of responsibility. And everybody who's on the partnership can remind him, and Vito Chiesa, who's the chair, who is— No,
but if he's not on the call, that's what happens when you're not on the call.
Whether or not you're on the call, I'm going to volunteer you. Okay, or somebody said I voluntold people a lot. Well, too bad. As I just said, nobody gets off the hook. all the county superintendents need to be really brought into this conversation now. And I think, Mark, back to you when we can.
By the way, he is on the call. I've been just told.
Oh, he is. Okay, well,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez can then defend himself, but
But I'm
doesn't get.
pretty sure I saw him shaking his head yes to everything.
Good. Okay. Well, I love the conversation because this is how we roll in the Valley. I think, Mark, that's a really good reminder to us that when you're convening all the higher education institutions, we want to have all the education leaders with us to have this conversation, which we said we want to do in November after the election. So everybody stay tuned.
Yeah, no, we as folks probably know, the Maddy Institute now is working with all 4 public universities in the region: UC Merced, Fresno State, Stan State, and CSU Bakersfield. And this is one of the issues we're going to bring to the forefront. So we're hoping to have the intellectual heft of 4 universities behind this project, which should be really helpful. It was Jason is asking, he works with a supervisor. I don't know which county supervisor he works for, unfortunately, but he's asking what kinds of ordinances can be implemented by the County Board of Supervisors to plan for broadband, to expedite rollout, et cetera. What would you recommend along those lines?
So, Jason, I will also have on our website, there is a model policy you can put into a general plan, a model ordinance that you can also adopt. And then, as I said, Valley Vision is updating it and we'll have a newer version. But the important thing that helps a jurisdiction be able to streamline permitting is if you have in your general plan, if you have for a county city, if you have also policies that you can embed in ordinances that say, we understand that high-speed internet infrastructure is essential for quality of life, public protection, and reducing impacts on the environment. We are therefore going to adopt policies and ordinances that accelerate the deployment of broadband to achieve these things in the public interest. Now you've established that foundation that allows you to go the next step at the permitting desk and streamline permitting without having taken a position that would make you vulnerable to accusations that you're picking and choosing winners in the economy. It's really establishing the foundation that is policy. The next is, in fact, to make sure that, as I say, we've got to be able to approve and permit in the public sector at the speed of construction in the private sector. So basically, I think if we took a show of hands, everybody on this call would acknowledge high-speed internet access is essential these days. We might have thought it was really helpful before. We now think our life depends on it. If we're going to get a notice about evacuation, in terms of a wildfire, or if we're told to go to, by PG&E, the website for information about a public safety power shutoff. It's really hard to go to a website if you're not online. If we want to get health information, do distance learning, et cetera, it's actually essential infrastructure. And so that speed of being able to permit actually allows an internet service provider to monetize the savings and put back into their own infrastructure builds. It's a way of capturing greater productivity in the economy. The kind of thing that some...
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? When you're saying that, I just think of reforming the California environmental laws. Does this have any implications for that? Was you're doing broadband? I assume it would have some implications.
It does. I've long said that the California Environmental Quality Act actually needs to be reformed or modernized without any diminution of environmental protection. I'm a fierce environmentalist. But when I was a county supervisor, some of you know I've been in public office, local level, planning commission, county supervisor. I swear to you that had I been able to get all the money we paid for EIRs and to attorneys on CEQA compliance, I actually could have saved the environment. We chew up too much money in the bureaucracy of CEQA, and the problem with the way the law has been interpreted is through case law in which we do not have reliable standards or rebuttable presumptions for the public sector or even for the private applicant. So yes, Mark, that's exactly what should be done. I've advised the state that there should be, for example, a master EIR for all broadband deployment in California, in which then local jurisdictions could nest their project-specific analyses and either reach a negative declaration or decide they have to do an EIR. That's
I want to
using
get Paul asked a
EIR
question.
for this.
I want to get to a question that Paul asked, but I want to just follow up on this for a second. I am not an expert at all in CEQA. I just know that it's an issue. But typically, a lot of times in state and federal regulation, it's kind of command and control. Here are the things you have to hit, and you're fined or whatever if you don't hit them. But there are other attempts to say, listen, here's our target. You business figure out how to get to point B. Could that be the modification of CEQA that still gets to the environmental standards that we all want, but do so in a way that's more economically feasible?
It's certainly an approach that would be a lot more efficient, and then the public sector can easily work with CEQA, even in its current form, that I think is inadequate, in order to support the private investment. What that requires, Mark, is a point of leadership that has all of the jurisdictions talking to each other in order to be that interface for the private sector. It's amazing to me, and I'm going to preach a little bit, I do not understand why the private sector even tolerates the way we are so disorganized and dysfunctional in the public sector, because it is a full-time job just trying to figure out the government bureaucracy to navigate. We have to do a much better job on the public side. And I see comments. I think we've got the leader.
I want to ask before we get to, I do want to ask, Paul's been waiting patiently probably for this question to be asked, and that is, are there targets to download and upload speeds now and going into the future? Also, is there an affordability goal for families, especially those with children with learning that are learning remotely?
Very good questions. The speed that is necessary at the house or at the home has totally changed since everybody was told to go home and get online. I mean, we did not, for the most part, nobody envisioned a scenario in which we would have 6.2 million K-12 kids, 300,000 teachers, another 4 million in higher education, another 7 million adults working from home, and people trying to see their doctor online. The network was never constructed for essentially 12 million people online simultaneously in two-way communication. So what we have learned, Paul, is that the speeds that are necessary at the household, and if we get them to be adequate at the household, then they're going to be adequate all along that path of deployment. It's why I say we must have fiber middle mile to connect to the fiber backbone. Those download speeds that we as school districts have continued to change, and they're, everywhere from I get 25.3, I get 325, I get 25.25, I get 50.50. Where we're going with policy is to say that the speed should be dynamic, and whatever is necessary at any given point in time to support distance learning, i.e. from the resident to a school, to a classroom, and telehealth. That means the networks also have to be more symmetrical. We have had always the emphasis when we say a speed like 25.3, we mean 25 megabits download, 3 megabits upload. We actually thought 10, 12 years ago that those speeds would start to be more in line, that more of us would generate content. It was that we all started watching Netflix. Quite honestly, the download speeds have been driven by 50% of that demand by Netflix, by downloading movies. And so really, we are now saying that fiber middle mile, whatever is necessary at the end user, and that we need to think that that's gravitating pretty fast towards 100, believe it or not. So that's the speed. On the cost, we spent a lot of time assisting low-income households, doing focus groups with low-income residents in California who don't speak English by and large, who have never had a computer and have never been online at home. So that's the person we we talk to about broadband and what can you afford. Here's what we get back. When the resident I just described, who is truly digitally disadvantaged, has the opportunity to think about the value proposition, they say to us, yes, we would pay $15 to $20 a month. There are households that can't pay that amount. And our solution at this point in time is to get the internet service providers to improve their affordable offers that are largely in that $15 to $20 a month range. So AT&T, Comcast, Frontier, Charter, AllServe, the San Joaquin Valley, T-Mobile is expanding, having offers. So that's, the universe. Verizon does not have an affordable offer. They make deals with school districts, but they don't have an affordable offer that the public can sign up for. And for those who cannot afford that, we need to have a robust internet lifeline program in California that complements the lifeline telephone. So that's the answer. I want to say one more thing because we have so many educators on this call, and I see Marcy Masamoto's on, and there's conversations going back and forth. Kurt, of course, knows this a lot better than I do, and he can always correct me. He's never been reluctant to correct me before, but in any event, here's what I'm going to say, Kurt. We have school districts, because they're trying to get all their students online, school districts throughout the state, and I spend a lot of time in San Jose these days, in the capital of Silicon Valley, because the city of San Jose has engaged CETIF to help them with their grant making for digital inclusion as they're collecting fees for 5G rollout. And school districts are paying what I consider outrageous amounts of money for per student subscriptions on hotspots, anywhere from $25 to $37 a student a month. What a sweet deal for an ISP, because school district are going to write one check. They don't have to go collect it from everybody. And if we had that for every student throughout the state who is not adequately connected today, that is another $1 billion on top of the current education budget for the state. Well, I have
1 billion here, 1 billion there, it starts to add up.
That's what Senator Dirksen said. But if I had $1 billion here and $1 billion there, here's what I would invest in school districts. I would be actually putting more money into principals and teachers in schools that are in low-income communities and rewarding them for academic performance. Everybody should have skin in the game. I have no problem saying teachers are my first priority to compensate adequately. And I think having families be able to know about and access those affordable offers with a backup of Lifeline for those who can't afford it is a much better shared responsibility on funding all of this, if you will. So I hope that answered Paul's question.
Let me switch gears a little bit. There's Larry was asking about, he looked at your board, noticed that there were a lot of people from the Bay Area and from LA, but not many or any from the Valley. I would correct Larry a little bit to say that, well, we do have Sunny as the CEO, and Sunny definitely has the Valley's back. But what about that? What about Valley representation?
We agree, and as I said, Carol Whiteside was a founding director. If you read the CPUC order, Larry, that established the California Emerging Technology Fund, I already admitted up front, I wasn't paying much attention to it. The order actually spent more time describing how the first board would be constituted than what we were supposed to do. And the board was constituted before I was hired. Now, with Carol's retirement, I think we all recognize that there should be a voice from the San Joaquin Valley. So I think this is a good time for us to have this little informal, quiet conversation among just our friends in the Valley for who should be, who wants to be considered, because I think that's entirely appropriate. I think we've arrived if there is competition for people to be on the CETF board.
So that's great. Denise is asking about whether you're aware of UC Merced's effort in health policy research involved, let's see, with New Telehealth Project in the San Joaquin Valley. Have you heard have you heard or been involved with the new Activate project at Livingston Community Health?
Actually, Jose mentioned in Livingston Health Activate, but we need to know a lot more. I see Marcy saying more than one voice from the Valley. I love all the voices from the Valley, Marcy. So, you know, everybody should be engaged and help us. In terms of what UC Merced is doing, I always think we don't know enough. Where I know some, because when Carol Whiteside did retire, we put a donation into UC Merced for Carol Whiteside scholars to support in scholarships for female students. The underwriting of their students helping with closing the digital divide in the San Joaquin Valley. It's modest. I mean, we are pretty small, but that is, again, Mark, part of what we should be discussing when you convene everybody in November.
Well, thank you for that. There was also a comment here about Early Mart School District and the fact that they bought 2 cell towers with some money and used that as a way to kind of have broadband reach more of their community.
And I think that's a great solution. You know, Kings County, the Kings County Office of Education long ago has KingsNet using education spectrum. There is no one way to do this. Competition is actually a very good thing. Competition among internet service providers, competition in terms of ideas and innovation. And it goes back to the good old farm value of if something's broken, fix it. And you might not figure out the best way the first time, but we'll continue to innovate as we go along.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I actually grew up on a farm as well, but in upstate New York, and we got our water from a well. And I remember as a kid, the well froze, and so you're not getting any water. So my dad had me going head first into the well to wrap a heat coil around so we could get water. That was a fun experience. So yes, if you don't take care of it, you don't get on the farm. I want to ask you a question about interesting question from Larry. It says, have you ever considered using the fund to incentivize industrial development through data centers developed in rural California areas and the economic growth that could come from that technology growth?
So Larry, we have not, because the way the monies flow to us, we generally don't have enough cash at one point in time. But it's a great idea. So what is needed, though, as your question implies, is that that kind of innovative thinking about business development that goes with broadband infrastructure deployment. GoBiz is very involved these days with the high-speed internet issue and also as part of the governor's executive order. And part of what we were looking at through CSU Fresno, Eduardo Gonzalez, and the preferred scenario for infrastructure deployment that they finished a study on was, as an example, Larry, what Keith Berthold had come up with that I think is just fascinating, which is vertical, what he calls vertical transportation, right? Being able to levitate up and not necessarily have to have runways, but we have a lot of general aviation facilities. We have a pretty big abandoned or retired, reused Air Force base sitting there in Atwater. We've got, Meadowfield in Kern County. We've got, this is not our vision. I wasn't smart enough to come up with it. Keith and folks did. A lot of airport facilities that should be, and we intend it to be, connected with high-speed internet service to be that underlying infrastructure for the potential of vertical transportation going forward. Louisa will remember the conversation we had in Houston about a year ago. I think that's right. Both Eduardo and Shelby Gonzalez can verify that. I'm just fascinated with that idea. The point I want to make, back to Larry, is we also can tap into other funds in the San Joaquin Valley. Even if CETF doesn't have the resources, we can support you. There's a consortium of foundations looking at investing in the San Joaquin Valley again. We can go to GoBiz. There has to be an ability to connect the dots. And that is what the California Foundation for, or the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley was actually intended to be, as you'll recall, Paul. It's that we have an ongoing governance structure that can be agile in tapping into the best ideas, bringing to the table the private sector to work with the public leadership, and let's get the San Joaquin Valley's potential fully realized in our lifetime.
So we've only got about 10 minutes left, and I've got a few questions. I know Jerry Dyer apparently has a question. We'll get to that in a moment. Two quick points. Eduardo makes a really good point about best practices. You're talking about earlier, Martin, what they've done. Do you have a kind of a compendium of best practices, number one? And there are some questions here about the foothill areas. Are you involved in the foothill areas?
We are. So there is the Central Sierra Regional Consortium that is Tuolumne, Mariposa, Amador, Calaveras. So, and they have a little piece of Alpine. So we work very closely there. You go a little farther north, their regional consortium is called Gold Country, that has 4 more counties. So we work with all of the regional consortia throughout the state. And we sponsor the legislation that provides funding from the California Advanced Services Fund for it. Okay, so yes, we are. But therein lies, their communications from Tuolumne County don't respect a boundary as they're coming into Fresno or Madera, right? I mean, we've got to have coordination across regional lines. So we do their work there, and we do have some best practices. A lot of them we have compiled, more are available. And I see Jerry's question is, well, what else can a city do? And Jerry, the big city mayors as a voice together are actually unbelievably impactful to the ISPs. Probably the thing that got everybody's attention more than anything else about speeds and about adequate infrastructure is when the mayors all signed a common letter in May. So that's one thing. Number two is, I think actually adding your voice through and with what we're doing through CSU Fresno and the regional consortium about speeds and what you see as necessary is very, very helpful. As a big city mayor, you have a bigger chair at the table than some of the rest of us.
I'm sorry. I also wanted to kind of mention the best practice. I think Eduardo, since he brought it up, I think we should delegate to him being a clearinghouse for those best practices that he can then maybe send along to you.
Let's do it. I think that's
never
perfect, Mark. That's a perfect solution here.
All right. Do we have any other questions before we get off? One thing I should let folks know, a few things. One is, we're recording this, so we'll probably have it online for folks. There's, not surprising with Sunny, it's a chock full of information. You literally, I didn't even try to keep notes. There's just so much information here. I'm going to go back and take a look at this again. So thank you, Sunny, so much for all that information. Then I want to apologize to anyone if I didn't get their names right. One of the things this taught me today was I have to give in and get glasses. So I apologize to anybody whose name I got wrong. Is there anything you want to say, Sunny, as we kind of wrap up this conversation?
I just want to again end with my it is, I call it my beloved San Joaquin Valley. There is unbelievable talent, unbelievable potential, and such great innovation and ideas that serve the rest of the state. We've been talking about broadband today, and we've all come to realize how important it is. I will say to all of you, when I began this job, I could barely spell broadband. So it's technology is a very powerful and can be empowering tool. It's only a tool. Yes, it's an essential infrastructure, but it never takes the place of leadership. And that's why I actually want to just underscore how important it is for the San Joaquin Valley's leadership to continue to be present, active, and registered in Sacramento for us to go in the right direction. And I am very honored to be back among all of you today.
Well, thank you very much, Sunny, for doing this. Really appreciate it. Again, tremendous amount of information here. A fantastic way to start off our digital speaker series. So we're very excited about that, having you be the one that leads us, as usual. And I think that I see great things. I mean, tremendous opportunities. I mean, we're in this crisis that we're dealing with now with the pandemic, but it does open up tremendous opportunities for the Valley. And I think this whole issue, I think, is critical for telework, distance learning, telemedicine, et cetera. So thank you very much, Sunny, for agreeing to do this. I want to let our audience know that we're going to be doing these on a regular basis. I don't want to scare my staff and tell we'll try to do this once a month, but next month we'll be doing one with John Myers with the LA Times and Dan Walters with Cal Matters about the upcoming November elections. They always have very interesting thoughts. Dan is a walking encyclopedia of California legislative and political activity, and John Myers is, of course, one of the leading commenters on California politics. So we'll let you know about that as we get that date short up in time. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And again, log on to the Maddy Institute website if you want to learn more. You'll see this recording there. In addition, if you haven't signed up for the Maddy Daily, I'm going to ask Sunny to make one last comment, actually, and that is specifically about the Maddy Daily. To ask whether or not, this is a compendium of news articles from throughout the San Joaquin Valley on various topics, whether it be ag or the economy or criminal justice, education, et cetera. I wanted a tip of the hat to Mike Lukens, who started this eons ago, and then also to Mike Lukens, because it's now on my plate, and that thing is a behemoth every day that myself and our staff put together. But a comment about the Maddy Daily, and then after you hear Sunny, I'm doing something the lawyer's never supposed to do, and that's ask a question I don't know the answer to. But I'm going to ask you that question, and then after I know it's going to be a positive response, if you want to sign up for the Maddy Daily, please let us know. We're happy to put you on our free newsletter. So, Sunny, any comments about the Maddy Daily?
Well, it's great to hear Mike's name again, and I'll be reminded. I know if there's anything I need to start with in terms of summary of the key articles and politics of the day, I go to your newsletter, and it's everything I ever wanted to know and more. So thank you so much for that work. And I always, Mark, think, how in the heck do you get it all compiled on such a regular basis? So
well, I will tell you, today actually is my anniversary, and I think my wife would like as an anniversary present for me to put down my phone and stop sending articles, into the, doing the Maddy Daily. I think she'd like that. Anyway, well, thank you everyone for being here with us today. Thank you so much again, Sunny, for being here, and we look forward to seeing everyone next time. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.